The cafe was unusually quiet that morning. Sunlight spilled gently across the wooden tables, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air. For most customers, it was just another ordinary day. But for Emily, a 24-year-old waitress juggling college, bills, and the weight of life on her young shoulders, every day felt like a test of patience and resilience. Her warm smile hid the exhaustion in her eyes, because despite her struggles, Emily believed in one thing deeply: kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything. That morning, she noticed him, an old man walking slowly into the cafe. His clothes were worn out, his shoes scuffed, and his face carried the heaviness of someone who had lived through too many storms. His hair was silver, his hands slightly trembling, and his eyes, though tired, had a flicker of something unspoken. He quietly sat down at a corner table and looked around with hesitation, as if unsure whether he even belonged there. Emily approached with her usual warmth. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you?" The man looked at the menu, then at her, and finally said, Just a small coffee, please." Emily noticed how his hands lingered over his pocket, fumbling with a few crumpled bills. It was clear he was counting, making sure he had just enough. For a moment, her heart clenched. She remembered nights when she and her younger brother had gone to bed with nothing but tap water and leftover bread. She knew that look, the quiet shame of struggling, the fear of being judged. Without a second thought, Emily smiled and said, "Don't worry about it today. This one's on me." The man's eyes widened. "On you? But why?" "Because sometimes," she said softly, "everyone deserves a little kindness." He stared at her for a long moment, his lips trembling, then nodded slowly. "Thank you, young lady. You don't know what this means to me." Emily went about her work, not realizing that this simple act would change the course of her life forever. The old man sat there sipping his coffee slowly, almost reverently, as if it were the finest drink he'd ever had. But inside, his mind was racing. His name was Richard Hall, a billionaire in disguise. Not the flashy kind you see on magazine covers, but the kind who had built empires in silence, investing wisely, creating wealth, yet always carrying a loneliness that money could never cure. He had been visiting cafes like this across the city, searching for something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps a reminder that genuine kindness still existed in a world obsessed with profit. Richard had wealth beyond imagination, but he also had a broken heart. Years earlier, he had lost his wife to illness, and his only son, blinded by greed, had abandoned him after fighting over inheritance. Money had given Richard everything, but it had also stolen the one thing he craved: real human connection. And then came Emily. A stranger who, without knowing his name or worth, treated him with dignity. She gave him what no amount of money could buy: compassion. But Emily had her own storms. She was working double shifts, saving up to finish her nursing degree. Her younger brother, Daniel, just 16, was struggling in school and drifting toward the wrong crowd. Their mother had passed away years ago, and their father had left, leaving Emily to carry responsibilities far greater than her age. Some nights, Emily cried silently after work, wondering if she could keep going. Bills piled up, tuition deadlines loomed, and Daniel's rebellious streak only grew worse. She felt trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape, but she never let it show at work. To her customers, she was simply the kind waitress with the bright smile. And that smile had caught the attention of Richard. The next morning, Richard returned. And the morning after that. Each time, he ordered the same small coffee. Each time, Emily greeted him with kindness. Slowly, they began to talk. He asked about her life, her dreams. At first, Emily hesitated. What could she say to a stranger? But his gentle voice and patient eyes drew her in. She confessed her struggles, working 2 jobs, raising her brother, and trying desperately to keep her dream alive. Richard listened, his heart breaking at her honesty. She reminded him of his younger self, hungry for life, willing to sacrifice everything for family. Then one day, Emily broke down. It was after a long shift. Her brother had been caught skipping school, and she had received a letter that her tuition payment was overdue. Sitting at the counter with her head in her hands, she whispered, "Maybe I should just give up." Richard placed his trembling hand over hers. "Don't give up. The world needs people like you." What Emily didn't know was that Richard had begun making quiet plans. He wasn't just a lonely old man with a cup of coffee, he was a billionaire searching for someone worthy of his legacy. Weeks later, Emily received a letter in the mail. Confused, she opened it, only to find a scholarship notice. Her entire nursing degree had been paid for in full. Stunned, she looked at the signature at the bottom, the Hall Foundation. Her hands shook. She had heard of it before, a charitable trust run by the reclusive billionaire Richard Hall. But what did that have to do with her? The next day, Richard walked into the cafe as usual. Emily rushed to him, tears in her eyes. "It was you, wasn't it? You're Richard Hall." He smiled softly. "I told you, young lady. Sometimes kindness comes back to you in ways you least expect." From that moment, Emily's life began to change. Her studies were funded, her brother received mentorship programs through the foundation, and she finally saw hope where there had once been only struggle. But more importantly, she and Richard built a bond that neither of them had expected. For Emily, he became a guiding grandfather figure she never had. For Richard, she became the daughter he had always wished for, the one who valued people over wealth. Of course, challenges didn't disappear overnight. Emily still had to balance work and studies, and Daniel's path wasn't easy. But now, she had support. She had someone who believed in her. And Richard? For the first time in years, he had a family again, not by blood, but by kindness. Months later, at Emily's nursing graduation, Richard sat proudly in the front row. The old man who once sat quietly with a trembling cup of coffee now clapped with tears streaming down his cheeks. Emily hugged him tightly and whispered, "You changed my life." Richard shook his head. "No, Emily. You changed mine first, with just one cup of coffee." Final message for viewers. Dear friends, this story reminds us that even the smallest act of kindness can transform lives in ways we can't imagine. Emily gave freely, expecting nothing in return, and in doing so, she opened the door to blessings beyond her dreams. And Richard, despite his wealth, found what money could never buy, a family built on love and compassion. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced or witnessed a moment of kindness that changed everything? I'd love to hear your stories. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and join our growing family here on Be Kind Always, because together, we can spread hope, love, and kindness in a world that needs it more than ever.